Hello, we're going to begin section 3 of 3 for chapter 16, and we're going to focus on specialized education and accountability. Let's first talk about specialized education. These types of support services originated in 1973 as Public Law 93-112, also known as the Rehabilitation Act. Section 504 is the part that applies to schools and to many businesses. The law was reauthorized in 1990 as the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, this is the law that put Braille onto elevators, rails in public bathrooms, ramps into buildings, sign language interpreters at governors' conferences, etc. Students in school will have an IAP, an individual accommodation plan, and here at Converse you have a CAP card. It's a civil rights legislation. The oversight agency is the Office for Civil Rights. Specialized education is involved with any condition that substantially affects a major life activity, not just learning. It emphasizes accommodation and access. We get you to the activity. We get your wheelchair into the room. We get a sign language interpreter so you can attend to the lecture. All those kinds of things. After that, you're on your own. It does not require child fine. You or someone close to you may have to advocate for you. It does not require parental consent or notification, although in the schools I cannot imagine proceeding with specialized programming without parental involvement. There is no funding. Schools are only required to provide what is reasonable, and this is where it gets interesting. If a school is impoverished and doesn't have enough books to go around once, then they don't have to provide an extra set of books at home for the ADHD student, and that's a common accommodation for someone who can't keep up with materials. Another school with a reservoir of books would be asked to provide that extra set of books. Reasonable accommodations that are offered for a variety of concerns can include such things as preferential seating, additional time on tests, copy of peer notes, frequent bathroom breaks, etc. The last topic in this chapter deals with accountability. Understand, I am not opposed to accountability. We'll say, in God we trust, all others must show data. Data lets us know where we are succeeding and where we need to work harder. Information should come from a variety of sources and should be looking both at absolute levels of functioning and at progress. We have tended to look primarily at tests. We often rely on testing to measure accountability, and in many cases, testing is our sole measure, which, as someone who administered tests during her entire professional career, I would advise you not to do this. Tests should be used and interpreted within the larger picture of that student or that school's functioning. This slide lists some of our concerns with current accountability or testing practices. Now let's talk about one of the accountability measures that was enacted. No Child Left Behind, 2002, was a much maligned effort to mandate schools improve achievement for all children. Now it was authored by people who wanted vouchers but realized that wasn't going to happen. There is some sense that it may have been designed to discredit public schools. We think this because there were some impossible requirements. All children would be on grade level by 2014. Now this included our nonverbal, non-ambulatory children whose functioning is limited to lying on a beanbag and seizuring. Also included those children who may have never been to school until age 8, who don't speak English, and who just enrolled in 3rd grade. This law also relied on a punishment paradigm. Rather than giving struggling schools more assistance, they were given less. Schools were required to make AYP, that's adequate yearly progress, meaning every year they had to do better. This led to situations such as Malden High, which has been and is one of the top high schools in the nation, with one of the highest graduation rates anywhere. It was being considered a failing school because they had dropped a small percentage in their graduation rates one year. This law also doesn't recognize progress. So if one teacher takes her children from a test score of 450 to meet a proficiency standard of 500, she is a success. But another teacher who takes her children from a beginning test score of 300 to 499, well, this teacher is a failure. Much of this law was modeled after changes in the Houston School District, where Ron Page, he was one of our secretaries of education, he had been superintendent. Houston had gone from being one of the worst school districts in the nation to one of the best, virtually overnight. Now, shortly thereafter, whistleblowers came forth. They shared that there had been outright cheating on state tests. They also noted that a number of low-achieving students had been outright expelled for dubious reasons. And my favorite, they reported spuriously high graduation rates. Now, upon closer examination, these high graduation rates occurred when a freshman class of 2000 had shrunk to 500 seniors, but there were no dropouts reported. The Texas miracle. In order to be considered a dropout, you had to come in and fill out a lot of paperwork. If you just quit attending without filling out the paperwork, you were put in a file of transferred students who had not had their records requested. Contrast this. In South Carolina, you're considered a dropout if you miss 10 consecutive days with no communication. Now, states and superintendents protested vigorously. The law was changed and updated in 2015 as ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. Now, this reduced the amount of testing. It encouraged the use of other measures of success besides testing. The last word on this issue is that neither of these laws addressed the most serious issue that has been tied to the achievement gap between rich school districts and poor school districts, which is inadequate funding of those poorer districts. This is the end of Chapter 16. Next, we'll have our last chapter, which is on death, dying, and grieving.